Okay, so guys, you should be comfortable looking at the sine function and the cosine function with this is everything we're going to be graphing now. We started out with just the amplitude. We talked about reflections. We talked about the period. We talked about vertical shifts. Last time we were together, horizontal shifts or phase shifts. So what does A tell us about the graph? Yeah. Yeah, so A tells us the amplitude. How do you describe what the amplitude does? All right. All right, it tells you how far up it goes, how far down it goes, okay? And what does the next one, what does B tell us? All right, so the period is what? 2 pi divided by B is the period. What does K tell us? Yeah, that is our vertical shift. If K is positive, what does the graph do? It goes up. If K is negative, it takes the graph where? Down. Okay. And then we've got H. H tells us about something called a phase shift, which is just fancy words for moving what direction? Yeah, that's left or right. Okay. And so if I've got something like x plus h, where h is positive, that's moving which direction? Yeah, this is left. It's backwards from what you want to think. X minus h is going to move it to the right by a factor of h. Okay. Now, there's one thing we need to know, and I know you guys can handle this. So the period, everyone agree that this is what we talked about every time we graphed it. The period is 2 pi over b. Everyone agree with that? Okay. What would happen, so if I've got period equal 2 pi over b. Let's multiply both sides of that equation by b, okay? Just multiply both sides of the equation by b, okay? What do I get on the right? Yeah, so I get b times the period equal 2 pi. Does everyone agree with that? What would happen then if I divide both sides by the period? What do I get? B equals 2 pi over the period. So B is equal to 2 pi divided by the period, okay? So all the things we've been doing so far, you've been given B and you had to calculate the period in order to graph it. What if I were to tell you the period, how would you calculate B? 2 pi over the period. So the period is 2 pi over B. B is 2 pi over the period, okay? So it's just 2 pi over whichever one you don't know, whichever one you know, okay? So we're going to need that because now we're going to do things a little bit in reverse. Rather than me giving you the function and you graphing it, now I'm going to give you its attributes and you have to tell me what the function is, okay? Okay, this function is a sine function, okay? It has been reflected about the x-axis. What does that mean I'm going to have? It has to start with a negative sign, okay? It has an amplitude of 6, okay? So that means that, my amplitude A is going to have to be 6. And so let me just write, we're after something that looks like this. F of x equal A sine B x plus or minus h plus or minus k, okay? So this tells me A is 6, okay? The period is pi. What does that let me solve for then? B. B is going to be what? Yeah, it's 2 pi divided by the period. So it's equal to 2 pi over pi. What's 2 pi over pi? 2. So B is equal to 2. So I got A is equal to 6. B is equal to 2. Okay. The vertical shift of 2, what does that tell me in this equation? What's going to be 2? K. How about that? K is going to be equal to 2. right? And then a phase shift of minus pi over 3. Excuse me, minus 3 pi. I'm going minus 3 pi, so I'm going 3 pi to the what? If I'm going to the left, that means that what's going to be in the parentheses is going to have to look like what? It's going to have to be x plus 3 pi. That's what moves it to the left, okay? So what is this function? This function is f of x equal. So what's the function? What does it start off with? Negative. Negative. The amplitude goes first. Negative 6 sine. What's b? 2. And then I'm going to have a parentheses. And then what? X plus 3 pi plus 2. Okay? So this is just doing in reverse what we did yesterday. So yesterday I would give you this, and you would have to tell me the amplitude is 6. The period is 2 pi over 2, which is pi. It's a phase shift of negative 3 pi to the left, and the vertical shift is 2 up. Okay, so yesterday you started with this. You had to give me all this information and graph it. So now we're just doing that process in reverse. I give you the descriptions, you give me back what the function is. So let's look at this one. Write the equation of a cosine function with amplitude 1/2, period 3 pi, phase shift pi over 2, vertical shift negative 5. So amplitude of 1/2, that means that A is going to be equal to what? 1/2. And I'm after, so just to write down what I'm after something that looks like f of x equal A, cosine B, x plus or minus h plus or minus k. That's what I'm after it looking like, okay? So the period is 3 pi. What do I use that for? To find what? B. So the B is going to be 2 pi divided by what? Divided by 3 pi. B is 2 pi over the period. The period is 2 pi over B. The period is 2 pi over B, right? The period is always 2 pi over B, and B is always 2 pi over the... Okay. The period is what? Let me know that you know this. 2 pi over B. Okay, the period is 2 pi over B. B is what? 2 pi over the period. You just switch them, okay? That's all that is, okay? So what is B in this case? Well, no. The period is 3 pi. What's 2 pi divided by 3 pi? That's 2/3, okay? Okay. Vertical shift of negative 5. That means k is equal to what here? Negative 5, okay? If the phase shift is 1/2 pi, so if I'm moving 1/2 pi to the right, what's it going to look like in parentheses? It's going to be x what? Minus pi over 2, okay? So this function, f of x equal, what do I write? 1/2, that's the amplitude. Do I have a negative in front? No, I don't say it's reflected. So 1/2 cosine, what goes next? 2/3. And then parentheses what? Yeah, x minus pi over 2 minus 5, okay? Okay, pretty straightforward, right? Okay. Let's look at the next one. Write the equation for a sine function that has an amplitude of 4.5, period of 3 pi, and a phase shift of 6, okay? So let's just start, see if you can write this one out. F of x equal. What's the first thing I write? 4.5. The amplitude goes first. And then what kind of trig function is this? Sine. Okay, the period is what? 3 pi. So how do I figure out B? B is 2 pi divided by 3 pi, which is 2/3 again, right? So this is 2/3 Okay, it has a phase shift of 6. So if I go 6 to the right, how do I write that? X minus 6. And then is there a vertical shift? No, that's it. Okay, so that's all you have to do. Molly, question? You could if you wanted. You could write plus 0 at the end. There's no vertical shift, so that's fine. That just lets you know that, hey, I looked at it and there was nothing there. If you want to write that, that's fine. Okay, give me the equation of a sine function that has a reflection about the x-axis, all this stuff. What does it mean to have a reflection about the x-axis? What's going to have to show up? Okay, we'll have a negative sign. If it has an amplitude of 2, that means what is equal to 2? Yeah, a is equal to 2. Period of 4 pi, that helps me solve for what? B. B is going to be what? Yeah, it's going to be 2 pi divided by 4 pi, but not 1/2 pi, it's just going to be 1/2, okay? Phase shift of minus pi over 2, that's moving which way? To the left. How do I write that it moves to the left? X plus pi over 2, and then k is equal to -5. So what is this equation? F of x equal what? Yep, that's it. Okay. So hopefully this is straightforward, guys, right? Okay. Let's do another one, and then I think we have a couple of exercises I want you guys to do. Huh? This is what? Maybe a little bit if I give you the graph. I'm going to give you the graph in a minute, and you have to give me the equation. Okay, so this. No reflection about the x-axis. That means it's going to start with a plus or a minus sign. Yeah, it's going to start positive. Amplitude of 3. Okay. So if the period is pi over 2, how do I find b? Yeah, so b is equal to 2 pi divided by pi over 2, which is, it's 2 pi. If I'm dividing by pi over 2, that's the same as multiplying by 2 over pi, right? What is that number? Okay, I'm hearing all kind of wrong stuff. 2 pi divided by pi over 2. Dividing by pi over 2 is the same as multiplying by 2 over pi. Okay, so what is 2 pi times 2 divided by pi? Am I hearing it? The number 4, that's it. B is equal to 4. There's no pi there. It's 4, okay? It's pi divided by pi. 2 times pi times 2 divided by pi. Okay, so this is 4. Phase shift of pi, moving it to the right pi, how do I write that? That's going to be what? X minus pi. Vertical shift of 2, k is 2. So what is this guy? F of x equal. So 3 sine of what? 4 x minus pi plus 2. Now we could graph that, but to figure out the next question, what is the maximum value of this graph? Okay. Do I need to graph it, or can you figure it out? So if I were to graph that, the vertical shift tells me to do what? Go up 2, okay? Normally, how far up from 2, how far with the sine function? How high will it go after that? Normally goes up 1. What's this one going to do? It's going to go up 3, right? So what's 2 plus 3? Yeah, the maximum value is going to be 5 for this. So if you had trouble seeing that, we know that this graph is going to have a vertical shift of 2, and it's going to go something like this. This is going to have to go up 3, okay, because of the amplitude, okay? If I know the maximum value is 5. And then what is the minimum value? So I'm at 2. How far down will it go? So what's 2 minus 3? -1. So the minimum value is -1. Okay. If you have trouble thinking about that, you can just graph it. Okay. So this vertical shift said, don't graph on the x-axis, graph it at 2. Amplitude, I go up 3 and I go down 3. If I go up 3 from 2, I'm at 5. If I go down 3 from 2, I'm at -1. Okay? So all we're doing is, like the last time, you were looking at those functions and graphing them. Today, I'm giving you descriptions, you're giving me the function, and the thing you gotta really know, if the period is 2 pi over b, then b is 2 pi divided by the period. Okay? So what I want you guys to do, let's just see if you can put it together. Now, rather than give you a description, you've got 2 graphs here, one cosine, one sine. I want you to see if you can figure out the equation of this. So you can work with a friend, an enemy, whatever you want. Okay.